And we're live with another episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. As you can see, Ken has returned from his gallivanting across the Caribbean or somewhere. I don't know, like another made up place, something about, beaches and sand. I don't get it, but whatever. But we've had, Logic Hill's been on the last couple of weeks. We've been talking fuzzing. We've talked all sorts of strategies for analyzing apps, but kind of at a low level. So it's good to have Ken back. As far as announcements go, there's not really anything going right now. I don't know what conferences are going to pop up this fall. It seems like with this Delta variant and COVID, things have kind of all gone virtual again. So, I mean, Ken, I don't know if you've got anything on your radar. Outside of that.
No, yeah. I mean, I was going to do last con, but then that kind of fell through. So I don't know. Just waiting for the world to be normal again. So hopefully that happens.
we all are, right? Let's be honest. I'm not sure what's going on with LasCon. That's the one in Austin, Texas. That's an OWASP conference. It's supposed to be the 28th and 29th. I don't think we ever heard back. We talked about we submitted to do a secure code review workshop there, just to have people sit down.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
On just a one-day thing, not our full course, but we'll see if it comes back. I haven't heard anything on that. Otherwise, I know there's like another virtual AppSec or global AppSec going on. I mean, honestly, what I'd have people do right now is probably go revisit all the talks that happened at DEF CON, because there was a lot of content that came out there, and I know they're posting it all, right? But there's the DEF CON conference channel has a whole bunch of stuff from here. Let me post it up there on YouTube that like I haven't been through it all yet, right? Let me drop it in here. It's looks like you're reposting it. I mean, that's what I would suggest people start doing, and just combing through some of that content. There's going to be more that's popping out of there as far as like the AppSec Village and other places, but those are all the main tracks that are there. I think the only thing that's not on it at this point is the like closing ceremonies, which it's DEF CON, but all the good content has been posted, right? They did it pretty much live. I don't know. I mean, I think you were pretty much out when DEF CON happened. Did you follow anything that was coming out of it? I know Logi and I talked about HTTP2 and the stuff that James Kettle released, but did you see anything else?
I have not been I was completely out of pocket for 2 weeks, and sorry, I was not focused on computer security or computers or any form of those things. Security computers. Yeah, I was pretty focused on the old pina coladas and R&R, so didn't catch anything yet. Sorry, but I did see that the one thing I did see was, hold on, I'm trying to give this aggregate list that we had.
Oh yeah, I got that in there. I was going to put one more link. That this is the Cory Doctorow's talk. Cory was on. He did Midsummer Night's Gone with us last year, not Midwinter, but he's awesome. So and he's got really interesting takes on privacy, and it's not technically like computer security related, although it touches on it, right? But he's always got some good rant going on. If you're not following Cory, you probably should be. Let's see what else here. So there's Cory's talk as well. Yeah. But let me see. I was trying to think what else was in that list. I mean, that top hacks from Portswigger, of course, it has James Kettle's talk in there because it is Portswigger after all.
Yeah, it should, right?
Yeah.
It'd be weird if it didn't.
The one thing I find, right, and I don't know if you're the same way on this, right? There's a lot of deep research that comes out of Black Hat and DEF CON. And some of it is relevant to what you and I do on a daily basis. But I've always had this issue with those deep conferences that I don't know, it's so exploit and vulnerability focused. And by the time they actually release the talk, the vulnerability has been mitigated, right?
Yeah.
That while it's cool and usually like the techniques and other stuff you can draw from, uh, it's not as useful on a day-to-day basis as I would like it to be, which is kind of why I scrape things after the fact. Like most of the stuff that's in there, it doesn't change my my analysis of websites, my analysis of code, really all that much. Do you have a different take on that?
In past years, there have been like the new research on, like, I'm trying to think back to way back, a couple talks that were interesting. There was, I forget his name. We know him. He did a pretty cool .NET, like attacking .NET, like the sort of like common issues with .NET applications. And then there was one that was on, well, actually, the one you all did too was pretty cool. The what was that tool you wrote?
Oh, the Sierra tool stuff.
Yeah, the Sierra tool stuff. Like there, so there are. I think what I get out of those are either new, novel. Well, I say new and novel, but they're kind of variations of other vulnerabilities. But anyways, some new style of attack, but also tooling. And the only problem with the tooling, though, is every time I go to use, well, not every time, I shouldn't say that. I should say most of the time when I go to use tools that people have developed, it's just so developed for that conference that it's hard to use. It's not always super like usable. Support kind of dies off. And then after like 6 months from when the talk, and I'm guilty of this too, 6 months from when the talk was done, the tools kind of like fallen to the wayside. So it can be useful. Like, I don't remember if this was actually something released at DEF CON, but do you remember the tool for Oracle padding attacks?
Yeah, vaguely.
It was like a Java GUI, and you could basically tried to pad and tried to enumerate, like, I think it was like trying to like abuse view state type functionality. And it was, so the tool was like buggy, but I appreciated it because it was cool. But the tool was buggy for even validating that something was legitimately an issue. But the research itself was super dope. So it's like, it's like the research was really cool. I really enjoyed reading it. I think it had value, but the tooling was just kind of rough. So yeah, it's a mixture of like, honestly, it's fun. It's more fun than it is like work wise, And
well,
especially for me, dude, I handle spreadsheets these days lately, right? I mean, I do some technical work, sure, but it's like, for me, what's valuable may not be valuable for someone newer in their career, or in the midst of not doing, like, actually doing technical all day long technical work. I don't know how to say it, but I'm a manager, so.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum,
Oh,
bum,
great.
bum.
There went all of our listeners. They know you're a manager
right?
now. Yeah. No, I get it, right? And there is something to be said about hallway con, right? I think that's the primary reason that I go to most security conferences anymore is, number one, seeing people that I haven't seen for a while, because there's always a different mix that are there. And then number two, okay, is there something that's coming out of the conference that could help me on a day-to-day basis, whether that is something like padding Oracle, or, hey, maybe I'm giving a talk. So the speaker hallway con is actually quite good, right? Like, I think about where I met Clint Gibbler, or, some of these other, people in our industry. And a lot of that has to do with, hey, everybody kind of puts themselves out there to talk about something they're interested in or they're working on. And while it may not directly affect my day-to-day, getting to know those smart people pushes me in other ways, because it does kind of keep all of us on the top of our game. So I go back and forth. I'm with you. I enjoy the conferences, especially after, everything that's gone on the last couple of years. I definitely miss it. And I think that's why I have such a hard time with the virtual conferences, is that that's 50%, if not more, of the reason that we attend, or that I attend conferences, is to foster those relationships. And without it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I could always Slack or email this person, or, Discord or whatever. But being in the same location and actually having the ability to go to dinner or go get drinks that's a different activity. It causes different things to happen. So, yeah.
I think that, truthfully, the last time I was at DEF CON a couple years ago doing the Hacker One event was actually probably, from a learning perspective, easily as useful as attending any talk. I think it was really fun to watch. Again, it's like, if you've done this for any amount of length of time, it's like you've seen pretty much every variation of a vulnerability, right? So I'm not going to say that it's like, oh, I'm going to learn about new vulnerabilities at one of these events. But what I will see is like the different approaches and different methodologies that real people are using to make real money. And it's, to me, that was more useful than from an educational standpoint, purely from an educational standpoint, more useful than some of the talks I've definitely, far more than some of the talks I've attended. So that was, and maybe watching the CTF too has been fun in the past, for sure, as well. I think also ShmooCon's like CTF has always been fun to watch as well. And again, from like a somewhat educational standpoint, been useful. But I'm with you, man. Like I think the real value for me these days is just getting to discuss and so what are the things going on? What are the trends people are seeing with friends, with trusted folks I can, sit down and have a good conversation with. I think that's the real value. I wish I could have gone this year, just didn't line up with my schedule.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, that was one of the things this year that, outside of some of the like family stuff that went on, that I had to come back early, but there just wasn't a lot of attendees, right? There weren't a lot of people in town for Vegas or for DEF CON and Black Hat. And so it felt a little isolated. Yeah. Anyway, so.
Well, I heard that because I had, I think three folks on the team that I work with, four, I'm sorry, at least four, went to the DEF CON Black Hat, mostly DEF CON scene. I don't know what you want to call it. They went to DEF CON. And they said it was really weird because of the rooms being so empty. It just had a very strange vibe. Now, three of those people I believe had never been before, and one had. And she had said, the person who had gone had said that it wasn't the same feeling. It wasn't the same vibe. It was an attempt. An attempt was made, but it wasn't the same. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's what you kind of expected, right? With half the content, half the villages being all online, being in person. I kind of felt bad for those that were there for the first time to attend DEF CON, because it didn't have the same, like the energy was still pretty good. And there was a lot going on during the conference days, but things like the DEF CON 101 track weren't there. There just wasn't the same amount of village involvement that you would normally get, seeing the people like working on the different CTFs. It was all virtual. So it was kind of this strange mix of, hey, there's some stuff going on and it's kind of cool, but I could just go sit in my hotel room and watch the streams and, participate where I wanted to. And so I think a lot of the industry veterans or people that have been around for a few years, that's kind of what they did, because there wasn't a place to go and actually sit and do that. So, here's hoping to next year, right? I know that it's going to be spread across multiple locations, and, they're planning in person. They'll probably still stream some stuff live. They always do. But yeah, we'll see. At least they got another year to figure that out.
We'll still be doing the same shit in a year.
Come on, where's your faith, Ken? Where's your faith?
I lost my faith. My optimism is up on the floor. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm probably not. It's probably going to be still a shit show next summer. So anyways, I'm not at all bitter about the last couple of years. Not at all.
Cool.
Anywho,
okay.
So what do you want to get into? What do you want to talk about? I like that Bumble article. If you want to go through that, that was indicative.
Let's pull that up. I mean, this is a pretty common issue. I mean, you just read through it. I did it like a couple of days ago. So do you want to jump into it here? Let me post it quickly.
Yeah, you shared this article. So I mean, basically, it's okay. Like I said before the podcast, it's a long read, and maybe not necessarily. There would be nice if there was like a summary version, because I think a lot of it's explaining things that or I think you've come across this if you've ever done mobile app testing. In any case, the idea here, the gist is that it's walking through both how trilateration. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. I just literally learned this word today as I was reading this. So trilateration, I'll say that's what it is. But basically using the approximate distance between various locations to another individual to kind of guess, create maybe a Venn diagram of where they might be. That's at the highest level. That's the attack, right? And what they walk through the story is, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that the idea is triangulation, right? So and distances, how far you are away from someone. If you move yourself like three times and take that same distance reading, it'll actually give you a exact location on where someone else is. So, this is a problem that most social media apps have had in the past. Like, oh, this person is 2 miles away from you, right? Especially dating apps. It's been a problem in the past. But if they're 3 miles away from you at this location, all right, if I move somewhere else and get that same location information, and they're drawing circles around it, right? Maybe we should show it because it'll be easier to understand.
I'll share it.
Yeah. But once you have 3 locations, it basically gives you a pinpoint accurate measurement of where that person is. And where it's just an API, it's very easy to, hey, I'm going to change my location from here to, 2 miles away, take that up again, and then 2 miles away somewhere else. And all of a sudden, exactly those three circles that you've made, exactly where the other person is located. But that's why they call it triangulation. Because it does require 3 different measurements as opposed to 2, right? Or 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is, all right, do I need to stop? Well, I'll just keep this up. Whatever, who cares? I'll keep this up for now.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, did I screw something up? I think I might have screwed something up. Hold on.
Pulling the pin on frag attacks.
I don't know what just happened. Hold on, let me reshare because I'm bad at this stuff. All right, so.
Well, to be fair, you are a manager now, so that's.
Yeah. No. My technical work is broken up into smaller chunks these days, is all I mean. So, anyways, this is a very long article. All of this is basically a fake story, but it's so the names in the story are kind of changed to, to create a narrative that describes breaking apart an application to, basically be able to figure out other people's locations. So, but there's a few steps here. I don't know if I even need to keep this up on the screen. Maybe I'll just go back to it. But bottom line is they walk through, okay, here's what this attack and this research looked like for trilateration, or however you say it, with Tinder. Now we want to, in this premise, we want to figure out where our co-CEO is at, because maybe they're going to snitch on us. There's a whole background story they've created where it's like there's two CEOs and like one's doing something felonious and they're worried about that person that's doing the money laundering or whatever they were doing, cooking the books, is worried about the other co-CEO actually snitching and ratting them out. So they want to see if like they're within the 1 mile distance or closer rather to like the FBI headquarters in San Francisco. So that's the whole idea here, and the premise of why they're trying to determine where the CEO, the other co-CEO is at, and if they're snitching on them. So they use this mobile app called Bumble to determine and use trilateration type techniques to determine where the other CEO might be. But in order to do that, they have to go through all the typical things that you go through when you're testing a mobile app. So for instance, they bring up a few things. One is like figuring out, hey, what's my user ID? Like, can I swap around user IDs to, forge and spoof a location for another user, for my user? They have to bypass some image checks to validate their profile. The final kind of hurdle that's a sizable hurdle is that if they tamper with any requests, like in Burp or whatever, that those requests or create requests that they're going to automate and use maybe Burp to automate. If they tamper with it, the application rejects it because there's a hashing algorithm that gives like a signature. And if that signature doesn't match up with it's like HMAC validation, right? The content has to match up, and however the content gets hashed has to match up with the signature being sent in the header. So then they have to figure out like, how do we generate this signature so that we can, and I've done, and I know I'm sure you've done this, Seth. I know I've had to do this before, where I had mobile applications that's what they do. They create this little HMAC verification so that specifically your attempts at tampering with the request between the mobile app and a web server doesn't work. Unfortunately, though, most of the time this is all client-side based code. It's not hard to figure out how that's occurring. So and reversing that, which is exactly what they did. I think they reversed some JavaScript or something like that to figure out the hashing function and how it worked. They were able to then automate the tampering of requests and then generations of those signatures and the spoofing of the user ID to then basically send out incremental requests moving along a certain pattern of coordinates to then determine exactly where their co-CEO, Steve Stevington, I think is the name, is actually at, and if they're snitching on them. So it's a very long read, but that's kind of the gist. It's I think why I love this article, why I really like this article and that you brought it up, is that it's very indicative of mobile app testing. Like this is, yes, they talk about location-based stuff, but like the ways that they have to get around the protections built into the mobile app and the assumptions made by the developers of the mobile app is like 100% something realistic in what we see.
Oh, it is, right? And it's like these sort of validation functions that occur. It's anytime that you're trusting the client to send you data, and how often do we say this, right? Like user input is the most dangerous thing in an application. That's where the attacks come from. That's where we actually get exploited. And it's because we trust the user with too much. And just because you've released something on an app store doesn't mean that the user can't actually see it or someone can't pick it apart. Especially on the Android app store, decompiling Java is a very simple process. But
what about if it's obfuscated?
Yeah, it doesn't matter, right? Then it's obfuscated. You're right, it's obfuscated. But anytime that you're doing something, like encryption or like HMAC verification, you're building, any of that, you've just got to realize that people can tamper with it. Yeah, and eventually, it's a matter of when, not if. Somebody's going to screw with it. Somebody's going to make some changes. Somebody's going to try something out when they're bored. And especially in the case of a bug bounty program, right? That's exactly what you want, because you want to know where those edge cases are and where you have those weaknesses. But
yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing, is it's always cracks me. I bring that up, you get it. That's tongue in cheek, but yeah, obfuscation is like not something to hang your hat on whatsoever.
No,
for a number of reasons, especially if they're like a popular obfuscation tool. It's known how it's obfuscated. If it's hell, I mean, someone could get to your source code before the obfuscation occurs, right? Like there's a number of ways this stuff can happen. But either way, there's always a way to reverse this stuff. So it's kind of silly to hang your hat on that.
Yeah. Yep. It's just a matter of time, right? And like a dedicated attacker isn't going to be scared away by obfuscation. Yeah,
not at all.
They won't, and eventually, like anything that they control or that they're running on their own hardware, right? As a consumer, as a client, a user of the application, is something that can be tampered with. Whether that's a user ID, whether that's whether that's a waiting room ID. I mean, maybe this feeds in pretty closely to my new story.
Oh yes,
and I haven't told Ken about this yet, and actually. I'm wondering how far I should take it, right? Because we are
as far as possible. When in doubt, tell us everything. I do want to hear everything, so go for it.
And I do have screenshots. Okay, so this all starts. This is going to be adventures in virtual waiting rooms, right? It's becoming a series now, which is not something that I intended. Those of you that have been in the course or listened to some of my talks in the past have heard me talk about the waiting room, exploit, quote unquote, that I did years ago going to a Chelsea soccer match in London, right? Where I had to wait to buy a ticket, and I looked in the URL and it put me into like a waiting room, right? Like group ID of 7 or something like that, right? So I changed the group ID and was able to buy tickets like 45 minutes before I should have been able to. Woohoo, right? Like still paid for the tickets, but I jumped the line. And this is like this sort of waiting room functionality exists all over the web. And like I run into it, again and again. And, just, okay. All right. So yesterday, and, there's probably very few people that listen to our podcast that actually like do this. Well, whatever. Right. Okay. So yesterday, I'm trying to decide if I should actually state names and shame and but
just like make up random, I don't know, just make up random stuff. Call it Steve Stevington.
Yeah, Steve Stevington. I'm trying to figure out how, I mean, eventually I'll give the full rundown. But okay, so there was a specific event that I wanted to go to, right? And like we wanted to be able to attend and buy season passes too. And they released all of the season passes yesterday. And of course, right, there was such a rush on these season passes that you got put into a virtual waiting room. Now, the virtual waiting room, of course, like when I started looking at the API calls that was making back and forth to a status check to see whether or not I could actually buy the tickets yet, was giving me timings around, okay, this is when you started to sit in the waiting room. Here's a waiting room ID, and the waiting room was some GUID, right? Some GUID value. And then there was when they estimated I would actually be able to buy tickets. Now, the estimation it was giving me was like 8-10 hours in the future, right? And after, I'm working during the day, I had this up in the background and I'm like, man, this is just taking way too long, right? And so like, I want to be able to buy the tickets. I know they're available. There's people that are purchasing them right now. So let's start doing some Splunking. So of course I fire up Burp Suite. I open it up. The new one is still like the new GUID that's given to that session is still 10 hours in the future when I check the status API. And I start thinking about it and I'm like, wait a second, go back to the main waiting room page. And I noticed that the waiting room GUID is actually displayed down at the bottom of the page. all right. So if that's displayed down there, it means that other people are seeing different GUID values. And of course, no one else is going to, think that that's a protected value. No one else is going to be worried about it. And so what do? I take the term, I go look on Twitter for hashtag event name and look to see what other people are experiencing with that event. After about 2 minutes of spelunking, I see somebody's iPhone screenshot of their waiting room page with the ID at the bottom. And I take that over to Burp Suite and I'm like, hey, interrupt my next status request, change my ID, my GUID waiting room ID value from, the one that I had, which was now at like 7.5 hours, to this one that I just scraped off of Twitter. Hey, look, I can order tickets in 15 minutes now instead of 7.5 hours.
That's awesome.
Anyway, so at some point, we'll put out the actual event when it happened. I am talking to a couple of people about it, and who it was. But suffice to say, it's a very large, well-known company that's out there, and it's just not one that you would think would be an issue. The whole problem, though, came back to this fact that they had that ID value and they were displaying it right on the page as it was reloading the page every 45 seconds or whatever it was.
I have to admit, I was like, oh, maybe he's going to figure out some cool way to reverse the way they're generating GUIDs or do some sort of nope, just straight up check Twitter for people that posted.
That was my first indication was man, there's this GUID value crap, right? And I did the UUID decoding. It's a V4, a UUID, right? And so I knew what they were using to generate them. But if you know anything about UUIDs, they're extremely hard to predict without that key.
Right.
And so once I noticed that down at the bottom, I was like, sweet, right? It just. Anyway, it was a fun distraction. My wife was excited,
cool. Well, no, there's got to be some benefit to having this skill set outside of work. That's pretty cool, man. That's actually, it's funny. I don't get put into many situations where there's a waiting room, but a virtual waiting room like that. But it's super,
it's most of the time it's related to concerts, ticket pre-releases, and it's very common that they don't think about, the developers don't necessarily think about, hey, someone's going to try and bypass the waiting room, because it's not super sensitive, right? I'm still paying for the tickets. I'm still purchasing what I want, but I'm just able to do it in a quicker manner, or I'm able to get better seats. Like in the case of Chelsea, in this case, I hope I didn't bump somebody too bad, right? But we're talking thousands of people that do that, or that are buying these tickets. So it's a drop in the bucket. I doubt the developers noticed anything out of the ordinary. Vlogs probably didn't show anything. So it almost feels like a victimless crime, but then it's also oh crap, I just forced my way in and I was that jerk that's just jumped the line. But it's a virtual waiting room, right?
It is what it is. That's really cool, man. That's because 8 to 10 hours, who knows? Things might have been gone by that time. And Larry brings up a good point about tickets, ShmookCon, DerbyCon tickets. Man, I got to tell you, that used to bother me so much, ShmookCon's ticketing system. I was I won't get into it because I think we've talked about it before, but that used to drive me crazy. I'm just go with a provider. I'll pay $5 for the fee or whatever. If it was that, I think it was actually more than that. So but anyways, it was so frustrating. It was I don't know if it's still like that because I haven't tried to go to ShmookCon, to be honest with you, in a long time. Primarily because I was frustrated by the ticketing system.
Yeah. Yep. And
so I stopped. I was just whatever. I don't care anymore. It's too hard.
Mm-hmm. Give me a way to
Crazy.
bypass it and we'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, that used to drive me nuts. DerbyCon's no longer going on anymore, right? That's officially done as a conference.
Yeah. Yep. Derby's gone. I don't know what ShmooCon, did they do virtual last year?
Yeah, I don't know. Although that's a pretty timely for Derby to bow out. They kind of got
it right. Yeah.
They got it right. Yeah, it was right before everything kind of just closed down. So hey, kind of worked out. Wasn't going to be able to be a conference anyways for the next couple of years. So worked out in some way. But that's cool, man. Those are always fun. And also I just love that you didn't even it wasn't just like, let me go down this technical rabbit hole. It's like the simplest possible solution. Let's see if anybody's posted a picture of their GUID. That's amazing.
Well, that was it. Because what people get frustrated, right? Like we all do. You're sitting in this, you're like, oh, I'm going to go buy these tickets. And then you're like, holy crap. Like I've been sitting here for 45 minutes and this page just keeps loading. And there's a little like counter down at the bottom that basically like, oh, you're like, you're only 10% of the way through this line. Yeah. And so, somebody's taking a screenshot of that and complaining about it on Twitter. That's just, that is what it is. Yeah. And it's the people that we don't predict as developers, right? Like I always go back to that, right? Like people are going to do stuff that you didn't intend. And I know like the developers, like that GUID value, they probably didn't even really think about it, right? They displayed it on the screen in case that they needed it for support reasons. And they just didn't realize that I could use it for support reasons as well, or somebody else that realized what was going on. So, yeah. Anyway, so it was a fun little distraction for me yesterday, and adventures in virtual waiting rooms. We'll do a complete series at some point. I do have screenshots and that I need to anonymize a little bit before I release them completely. But yeah, we will at some point. We can revisit it.
Yeah, I do. Did want to post real quick, just a bit of news. Was just this whole interesting. I was just interesting that the founder of Helix Bitcoin Tumbler / Mixer service has pled guilty in a $300 million Bitcoin laundering service. So effectively, it's impossible to trace the origins and owners of Bitcoin due to this service. Moved over 350,000 Bitcoin, again, valued at over 300 million. And so this person is located out of Akron, Ohio. It's just more of just an interesting thing. I kind of wanted to bring up. It's like it's just funny to see. I guess that's why it's just more interesting. I don't know if there's any commentary you want to provide on that, but I did think that was just fairly interesting overall.
Yeah. I did unmute, didn't I? I don't know. Having like looked at some of those and dealt with some of the developers in the site or the cryptocurrency space, it's really Wild West. It feels a lot of, Stefan
talks about that. Yeah.
There's a lot of trust and there's a lot of money that's involved. And anytime you get that, there's a lot of people that'll jump on it just from a, how much can I get away with perspective. And it's not always super technical attacks, right? It's like, oh, look, there's this wallet that's available or it's sitting out there and easy to get to. I'm just going to take everything that's in it and transfer it some other place, right? The laundering of that is super interesting.
Yeah, because I assumed something like this would exist, but I wasn't aware it did exist. And so to see that someone actually has a Department of Justice plea agreement and has talked about like the full details of how it's done and hold on. Let me give you another article linked from that first one here. Also, one other thing before we hop off is I did want to post a new article by Maya. I don't even know how to say her last name. Kazarowski about burnout. But
yeah.
But anyways, going over. Yeah. So sorry, did I actually post that link? Let me look. I got distracted for a second. Yeah, I did. Okay. Let me put it on our general as well. So yeah, it just gives you a little bit more information. The actual,
on the actual like
how it works and everything.
Plea agreement and what actually happened there. Yeah.
It's super interesting, but I guess it's primarily for like dark web customers. Have zeros in Oh man, the terms they use here are hilarious. Software
like
god, programming god. What was that? Did it say something like that? Oh my goodness, so funny. Yeah, this is a long indictment. I mean, I just think it's our plea agreement. Tell my advisor services in the darkest space of the internet. Yeah.
Well, and it gets.
I'm glad that they.
It gets super complicated, right? On a low level, what's going on with things like Bitcoin, right? As they're transferring in and out of different wallets and who's got control of them. And then like you've got shared wallets, you've got, and so like you can see where when you are moving around hundreds of millions of dollars, it becomes very appetizing to certain people to just shave things off the top, right? Especially if they aren't already in that, in the financial space and are used to dealing with those amounts of that amount of money, right? Because, honestly, most people, 1% of that is going to change their life. And so like being able to figuring out a way to skim a tiny bit off the top feels like, oh, well, no one's going to notice because we're moving so much and it's just a drop in the bucket. And voila, all of a sudden, you run into a situation like this where you're laundering that much.
Yeah. Oof. Well, I'm glad they did catch them because they are enabling some bad stuff. Did look like some other companies got dimed out, or other entities got dimed out, having partnered with Helix, Alphabet, Evolution, Cloud9, etc. So, yeah, exactly. So, anyways, just more interesting than anything. And then again, like I don't really, we don't have to go into depth here, but I'm just trying to get some of the last bit of news that I wanted to say. I didn't see the question about until just now about making tutorials for beginners. I think that's a good idea. I know we've done that in the past, but not in any not in a coherent series, just like one-off blog posts and just, you'd have to like take together all of this stuff. So I think actually what might be better is either we create a list of things that we've already built out and put it into a list, and that's sort of the direction to get started, or repackage it. We can discuss that, Seth.
Yeah. Well, that was part of it today. I mean, you posted the burnout blog. The other thing that we wanted to show, right? We were talking about starting to do just small snippets, and we're starting to cut up some of the videos that we've done from previous podcast episodes. We'll post them to our channel on this is how you do X, right? Especially with things like Burp or Burp Suite, and even, as simple as looking for user enumeration or cross-site scripting and why that works. That's something that we could definitely jump into.
Yeah.
But let's look. I haven't actually pulled up that podcast. I remember she posted that.
Maya used to work at GitHub, I believe. So I'm not sure if, yeah. But I am curious about how this, basically, I think if I was to TLDR this, it's like working many hours with many calendar / Zoom style things without making any real progress, not feeling like you're making any progress, day in and day out being the same. And I guess saying, honestly, it's not one thing that was what caused her burnout. It was, probably what a lot of people are feeling, especially during this pandemic. I've noticed that trend. I've talked to a lot of friends who this seems to be a problem for a lot of people, where it's just sort of the same thing day in, day out, feeling tired all the time, not feeling productive, feeling a little listless. And anyways, but her response to burnout was the same back 4 years ago when I had some pretty extreme burnout. Kind of took a similar approach, but for me, that was like, I took 2.5 months to just do nothing with work, any sort of work related stuff. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that, but it was very necessary. I mean, I've talked to you about it, but like, it was a lot of going for long walks, a lot of going to the pool, a lot of like doing things that have nothing to do with computers. And then eventually, like, I started being like, oh, I want to actually write code again. I want to look at stuff. And then that's when I kind of knew things were getting better. So,
yeah.
But yeah, if you can take time off, I mean, I know not everybody can do it, but if you can take time off, do it. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like, I'm with her on the whole, like, feeling like everybody went remote all at the same time and then decided to fill their schedules with virtual meetings, right? At least this is what I was feeling. Instead of this kind of like, your standard in the office, drive by, ask a quick question and move on. It became, all right, I'm going to have this like formal 30-minute, hour-long meeting to talk about something that really should only take an email or a Slack message or, a drive-by question. And like, I got to this point where, or I'm at this point where I don't want to attend like virtual Zoom meetings, right? Like, I push back where I didn't before, right? Especially when everybody went virtual. And initially, I was like, sure, we can meet and talk about that. And then I'd look at my calendar and I'm like, crap, I have a meeting like every hour on the hour the whole day. There's nowhere for me to actually concentrate and get work done.
Right.
And so I started to push back. I was like, hey, like, why can't you just send me this, right? Like, why do we have to talk about it and pretend like we're interested? I wouldn't say it in those terms, but that's basically what it was. There's no reason that we need to have a virtual discussion on this. And, in person, it probably wouldn't have been the same. I wouldn't have pushed back quite as much, but virtually it feeds into this like cycle of crap. I don't feel like I got anything done today, at least personally.
Yeah. And actually, so Larry brings up this question, and Larry. Oh, that's great. I'm not sure about you guys, but I went from having 15% time spent in meetings for projects and status to like 40%. I would say it's more like gone from, for me, 15% to say like 70%. And again, this is something I'm hearing happen. I don't know why we're spending collectively, even at different entities and different organizations, so much time in these Zoom meetings. I suspect part of it is a lack of comfortability with asynchronous work style stuff. However, that doesn't explain why it's happening to someone like myself who works for a company who is async first anyways. In that case, I'm still struggling to explain it, but I think it's the speed has changed of what people want to decide, like how quickly they want things to get done and decisions to be made. I don't know. Like, honestly, there's probably a lot of factors to it, but for whatever for whatever reason, it's definitely on the rise, it seems like. So it's not just you, it's a lot of us.
Yeah.
Everyone I know, really, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've been dragging, right? Like I keep trying to find like little ways to, get out and about, right? Like I had to hire like project manager and people to help do business development stuff and just push things through as a small company because I couldn't do it anymore, right? I just
Right.
I got to this point that I'm like, okay, I'm trying to deliver and actually do technical work. And then all of the, hey, I'm helping or I'm running a business on top of that. Like mentally was taking a huge toll on me. Yeah. And then since then it's helped, but it's also just a difficult, man. Yeah. It's just tiring, right? That's what it is.
You're still managing something though. It doesn't completely offload your effort.
No.
It allows you to focus hopefully on the things you're really good at, but then there's always that thing of like every time you have to give something off to someone else, then there's other types of work involved in, outsourcing to someone else. So it's like, it is what it is. But like for me, one thing that I'm doing to address this, if it helps anyone else, is blocking off, like literally just putting blocks in my calendar of like no meeting zones. Also, I've started to make sure that I do like walk away, go, and if stuff falls on the floor, it's going to be the next day that I get back to it. You know what I mean? Like it's just going to have to be that way because I'm not willing personally to like do a full day of meetings and then get work done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't. So,
Yep.
anyways, so
Yeah,
that's my tip. I don't know if again, not everybody's got as much control over their schedule. It's different for everyone.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, part of this is, my own making, right? Like it's the victim of my own success as far as like, hey, running a small consulting firm. And yeah, and then like having people want me to do work, which is a great problem to have. But then it's, you get through with that 8 hours or whatever a day. There's still stuff that has to be done, right? That's the curse of being a small business owner and not being able to walk away from it truly, ever. It's really what it boils down to. So there's kind of that founder / like small business dilemma that's going on in my head at all times. And I can understand why people after, a few years of it are finally like, you know what, I'm done with this. Like we're going to find an exit strategy because it takes a lot. It does. Right. Yeah.
And speaking of that, there was a question about your business, Steph. Red Point Security.
Red Point Security. Yeah. Yep. It's just a small, like it's a boutique application security. We do a lot of secure code review. Funny that, right?
I don't get it. Why?
Why is that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's your bread and butter for sure.
Yep.
So,
let's see. What else do we want to? Do you want me to demo? Maybe we should really quick. May as well give.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing.
I've got Burp Suite up. Okay, so let me share this really quick. And I'm just going to share my entire screen, and I know it's going to do a weird thing here for a second. Okay.
Oh, John Poulin, by the way, mentioned he mentioned Stream Deck by Elgato. So I just, for what it's worth, maybe we should consider that at some point. I'm just saying it so I don't forget it.
Okay. We'll take a look at it. Right. Okay. So this is Vulnerable Task Manager. Ken and I are very familiar with this application. We use it for code reviews and I use it for demo training purposes. I have Burp Suite up. We went into the proxy. I clicked on open browser to actually open up the browser that's built into Burp Suite. You'll notice I'm using the professional version here, but this does work on the community version if you want to as well. But what you'll notice is like it's sending traffic back and forth. This is what you want to see. This VTM, it's somewhat password protected. But we get to the login screen. This is what you see here. What I'm going to demo today is actually brute forcing usernames and passwords. There's two flaws on the login page that we're going to look at. First is user enumeration, and then second is brute forcing of passwords. So the first one comes from the fact that, I put in something, a username, something that doesn't exist. You'll see I get this invalid username. Please try again. Okay. Now, what if I put in something like my name, because I know there's an account, but the password is bogus, login failed. There's obviously logic behind the scenes that is allowing for the enumeration of users based on the error message that's being returned here. This is a very simple check. This is a vulnerability that actually I find in probably 90% of the applications that I test. Not necessarily on the login page, but it's an authentication vulnerability associated with identifying users during the authentication phase. So the VTM, the task manager, is vulnerable to it within this, within the login page itself. And we'll notice that there were these post requests, right, to login that actually contain the username and password, right? Here's the username that didn't exist. And the response was 200. And then there's the same things here with, okay, there's Seth. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually take that request that gave login failed and push it to Intruder. Intruder is a utility built into Burp Suite that allows us to run attacks quickly against a specific endpoint. So we'll stick with a sniper attack. That means I'm just going to send the same payload to a location in this request. I eliminated the other places that I'm interested in, right? Like the only place that I'm interested in right now is this username failed. The rest of them don't matter to me right now. So I'm going to attack that username failed, and I'm going to drop different payloads into it. So I've defined the positions. It's going to VTM, and then I'm going to jump to payloads, and I'm going to add just a list of usernames. Right? This comes with the paid version of Burp Suite. What is it? There's something like 8,000 different usernames that exist in there. We could create a list. We could pull a list of usernames from sec lists or other locations. This is the built-in one that's for Burp Suite. But realistically, to run this attack, that's all I've got to do. The other thing that's going to be interesting, though, is actually doing some sort of payload. Oh, no, not payload processing here. Let's see. What is it? The matching, right? I want to actually extract from the response whether or not that login failed exists. So I'm going to add a new extraction item. You'll see here's the response. Let's look for login. Where is that message? Maybe that's not it. Where am I at here? And now I'm losing it. Sorry.
No, live demos are always fun.
Yeah, that's what happened here. So, okay, never mind. We're just going to look at the. Well, no, we should. Dang it! Why am I not seeing this here? That's the login, sign up, body content. Oh, there we go. Apparently, I missed it. Okay. All right. So we're just going to extract that out where it says login failed. Please try again. Right. Okay. At which point it's actually going to show us in the response what's going on. So I've got everything defined. Let's start that attack and see what happens. Okay. So anywhere that it says login failed, please try again means it's a valid username. And you'll see it's going fairly quickly here. We've already run 500, 600 attempts. But we can start to look and see, okay, it looks like there are a number of known accounts, right? There's an admin account, Allie, Austin, and the first one is just mine. This request 0 is the Seth account that I used initially. But I've got to give it time to parse through all of these. And Ken, maybe we'll just show user enumeration today. We can do other ones next time around. We can do password brute forcing, just given the time constraints that we're on today. But You'll see as we spin through this, like all these different accounts that exist. And I could have chosen a smaller list because it is a live demo, but we are getting the responses back that we want. As a developer or as a someone that's monitoring the system itself, I would be seeing these requests go back and forth with the database, and I would see quite a bit of activity and the failures that were happening, all coming from the same IP. So there's probably some monitoring that needs to be happening behind the scenes, and I could lock that out. But you'll notice that I'm not getting slowed down. The service itself is just sending responses again and again. And I probably could have done more threads on this. It's doing a single thread. But there you go, right? Like we've got, within, I guess, 2 minutes, we've actually got 10 or 12 different valid user accounts, just based on the fact that the login form is giving, a response that validates the user. And all of these, we could probably go back to timing attacks or something else if we had to, but the messages that are displayed on that login page are extremely useful to me as an attacker, because what's the next step here, Ken, after I get a list of usernames?
If you have a list of usernames, you're going to brute force passwords.
Yeah. Yep. We'll do the same thing. We'll turn it around. We'll brute force passwords next, and we'll take this payload. There we go. There's the Seth account.
And you'll make sure that you're aware of the lockout restrictions,
Yep.
things like that.
All that kind of stuff, right? Because we probably won't use like 8,000 different passwords on this, but specifically if I wanted to attack, let's see what Ken's password here. And do you want me to show this? Do you have time, Ken, for me to finish doing a brute force on a password?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. So we know that so we finished there, like looked at 9,000 or whatever, and we've got a list of, 10, 15 different usernames that exist in the application. We know that there's the Seth one, there's Ken. I'm going to pick on you because that's going to be fun, right?
Always fun.
Always fun. Yes, exactly. So what I'm going to do is actually come back to that same request, because I know that there is something going on here. And change that value. We're going to change up we're going to clear it out, but instead of looking at the username field, because we know that Seth and Ken both exist, we're going to look at this password field instead. So I'm going to add my target there, and then I'm going to change my payloads up, right? So we'll clear out whatever you've got there. I'm going to add from a list, and we got this nice password list that's in there too. Looks like there's 3,000 of them. I don't think that we lock out. I'm actually fairly certain that we don't, but we're going to brute force through that as well.
I would be very skeptical of any lockouts.
I'd be skeptical But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually remove that extraction as well, because we don't need that for this demo. That's 3,000 different.
This would be the time,
passwords.
though, I would probably point out to people about the fact that cookies, like you typically, when you're brute forcing, remove session cookies just in case people are trying to set a counter inside the session. So what that means is sometimes when you send invalid requests, they'll say, hey, put a invalid request +1 on this person's session. And so the actual controls on the session value, this has happened before for sure, many times. So that's why you always tend to remove the cookie, just so that like you're not tracked in your invalid attempts by the session.
Yep. Good. So I think that's everything on that. So I'm going to do the same thing, and we're just going to start that attack. And you'll notice there's a status of 200 on all of these. Like what I'm looking for is anything that's not the same, right? Whether that's the length or whether that's the status. Right. And I'm going to keep flipping back and forth, but we'll let it run through these 3,000 attempts and then actually see if there is something here that allows for, access. If I was going to be smart about it, I would probably create an account first and look and see what the response looks like when we are logging into an application. But as I just found this login page, I found that there was user enumeration and there was no restriction on attempts to log in. I'm just going for it, right? I wouldn't necessarily do this against most applications, especially if you don't have permission to test against them, right? That's probably a bad thing. But we'll let this one spin through all the way. Okay, so it finished. Let's see. Status. Oh man, doesn't look like we actually cracked anything there. And I failed because I picked the wrong account. Jeez.
That's because this Ken guy is super secure.
Dang
and dope and awesome and handsome and has good typing skills and a lot of other cool things.
Yeah, that's it. Right? Like, so we'll try it against Chris because that was another one that was in there. We'll see. The problem is the passwords maybe aren't in this password list that we pulled up, right? So there might be a different way that we have to target them.
Also, for those that are curious or maybe don't know, when you know that there is an account lockout, say 3 bad passwords or something like that, whatever it might be, you'll tend to enumerate once or twice all the usernames or email addresses, whatever you've collected. And then inevitably someone will have a super weak password. And obviously it's very common to just use the name of the website, 1, 2, 3, whatever. Right. So inevitably someone will have a terrible password. Password requirements only go so far.
Yep. Yeah. And you'll see that here. Oh, I think I just saw something change. All right. So this was Chris, right? Let's look at status. Oh, there we go. Okay. So payload 302, length is 801. You'll notice that that's completely different than every other request that has gone on here. So let's take a look and see if we can log in with that. Chris, test 1, 2, 3 was the password that was used. Voila. Now we're into the application. We're using Chris's account and yeah, I mean, that's it, right? Like we successfully enumerated user accounts that exist and exploited the fact that there was no brute force protection by logging into one of the users that had signed up. Now this source code is out there and available. If anybody's interested, I could point you at it, but it is, again, it's an intentionally vulnerable application that has these flaws in it. So you can test things out against it.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
I'm actually trying to find the VTM. It's on GitHub, right? Is it under yours or?
Yeah. Let me see if it's under. Might be under Redpoint Sec. Yeah, it's under Redpoint Sec VTM now. Okay. Here, I'll post it.
Sweet. Yeah. Still didn't hack Ken's account though. So
I know, Ken, you're the winner.
Yes.
Woohoo.
Get no prize.
Get no prize.
Internet points.
You win. Sweet. All right. So that's user enumeration and brute forcing. If anybody is, I'd encourage you to go try that out on other vulnerable applications as well. Whether that's Juice Shop and things like that. There's a ton of them out there that you can play with or try to find it in a bug bounty because it does exist. And if you can do it, you can earn some money finding it. So, cool. So yeah, Ken, anything else for today?
Nope. I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat.
Okay. Yeah, me too. All right. We'll go have a
nice chatting.
Yep. Good to have you back from your vacation and everything. Back. And we will talk to everybody next week.
Bye. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.